Well, good morning, everybody. It's Monday, January 26th, and we're watching the tail end of this pretty powerful winter storm that went through the midsection of the United States and eventually ended up across the east. Now, I want to show you where the system is this morning here in just a few moments, but I went back looking at Sunday's satellite data just to see if I could get a good representation as the clouds tried to clear out on where that snowpack is now across the United States. And still, as the sun was setting, there's still quite a bit of upper-level cloud kind of obscuring the nice clear view. Now, we'll probably get a better view of this today and tomorrow, so we'll be sure to check back in with it. But this is what I know so far. If we look at what was going on before the event, this is what our snow depth map looked like as of the 22nd. And a lot of it was across the northern tier of the United States, western mountains. We've been examining those snowpack totals throughout the last several weeks, knowing that we are well below average here. California, Sierra Nevada is doing okay. We need quite a bit more than the Northern Rockies and the Cascades as well. But if you're east of this region, much of Montana coming out of Alberta was snow-free, and our snow line sat somewhere there with kind of our best snows of the year, primarily being focused on the Great Lakes into pockets of the Northeast. Well, this is the after, so now we can get a good look at who did get the snow and who did not. And I got asked in the comments, hey, tell me which model did do the best. So we'll do that in just a few seconds, but I want to point out that the trajectory of the storm system did not add snow to this corridor because it was so far to the south. Now, as we look at it, snow depths this morning, we continue to see more snow falling into the northeast, so this is only going to continue. And this was through midnight last night, so we did add quite a bit more snow here just in the last 6 hours or so. But if you look at the snow water equivalent, I'll be honest with you, this is hydrologically the main focus because this will melt. It's going to take some time because we've got a lot of Arctic air coming into this, but this will melt, and we're going to get quite a bit of moisture out of this into the soil. And don't forget, to the south of this, we did have rain. There was quite a bit of rain here. I'll take a closer look at that in just a moment here. But I did want to show you this graphic. This is from the National Snowfall Analysis website. It's nohrsc.noaa.gov/snowfall. You probably have this one bookmarked if you watch enough of our weather content. And I got asked, well, which model did the best, right? Now remember, the GFS had a very, very narrow band of snow all the way up through Friday's forecasts before this storm started. It did not include more of this northern snow. I mean, just as an example, I remember telling my kids on Friday, they asked how much snow are we going to get this weekend. And I said, well, let me show you the models. We said the European model had us at 4 to 8 inches of snow here in east central Illinois. The GFS had almost nothing. And just to kind of put this out there, I did put out on our website and also on our Facebook page this map of the European snowfall totals, European model snowfall totals, as of early Saturday morning, just to kind of get a good glimpse of this. And in this particular case, the European had the wave right. It got that correct. And therefore, the higher snowfall totals to the north and then along the Ohio Valley, coming out of parts of Oklahoma first, by the way, through Arkansas, then into the Ohio Valley and into the Northeast. This is where the European model really shone. I think you would have been wisest to use the blended forecast, the NBM, for pockets of the Northeast, given that some of these snowfall totals easily eclipsed a foot or more, and that was where the NBM seemed to be the most aggressive on the snow. On the ice side of this, I don't have a map. There's not an ice map like this made by the National Weather Service or anyone else that I know of, and so I'm going to show you this, though. I think one of the hardest hit states was Tennessee, and right now we still have 250,000 customers in Tennessee without power, 157,000 in Mississippi, 125,000 in Louisiana. But this ice storm, you can kind of track it. I wish that little hover would go away, but if you kind of look there, you can see from northern parts of Louisiana, into Mississippi. See it running right across this part of Mississippi, and then into Tennessee. There you go. It's at that corridor right through there where we picked up well more than an inch of total ice accumulation. So from Texas to the East Coast, this was extremely rough go of it here. Now, I built in over the weekend, because I was just staring at this weather system, I've been working on 2 new models to add to our system. First, I'm working on the NAM and the HRR, and then I'm also adding this. This is the MRMS data. So what you're going to have the ability to do very soon is be able to zoom in anywhere you want to have a closer look at total precipitation. And I want to point out that we did have some nasty storms that were down here to the south. And as we kind of hover over, there were places that picked up 2 to 3 inches of rainfall, some places even more than that, based off of the latest data. What I do want folks to understand is to the north where all that snow came out. For example, Indy, some places around Indy got more than a foot of snow, yet we only had 7/10 of the liquid equivalent. And the reason this is important to assess here is that the temperature of the air was so cold, we were looking at 15, maybe even 20 to 1 snow ratios. And there were several places through here that got a lot of snow. Now, I have to head to Columbus tonight, and I'm worried about this whole drive over for this event I'm doing here. And hopefully they're still going to have it, but I imagine these roads with the blowing and drifting are still quite a mess. Now, we're going to continue to watch these amounts into the northeast. We're going to continue to watch them grow this morning. But that's what I have, and I can't wait to be able to release this in our new version of the website coming out very, very soon. Okay, that was it on precip. Let's now just talk about temperatures here, because so much of the country is still in cold weather advisories or extreme cold watches or warnings, and they get all the way down to the Gulf Coast. We're very, very cold down into south central Florida as well. And that's going to be the mainstay of this as we just watch the tail end of this system leave the northeast. Now, just thinking, as this system leaves and that cold air comes just driving through, we do expect to see more lake effect snow. Like, look at this beautiful shore parallel band coming through Lake Michigan overnight, last night into this morning, just dumping snow in places right here in this narrowly focused area of southwestern Michigan, northern Indiana. But that's the system as it left, and it dumped a lot of ice into parts of the Carolinas and southern Virginia, then snow north of that. And this morning, we just have the snow into the interior as the system is offshore, okay? By the way, since I brought up the lake effect, if you were watching the radar on Saturday, there were three total lake effect vortices just rolling right through here. It's beautiful to watch. But as this system leaves, I did want to check out the latest misery map. I don't know if you've ever been here before, but flightaware.com/misery map. You can kind of see over each of the major airports across the country who has the most delays and how it's kind of impacting travel around the U.S. And you can see Boston, JFK, and LaGuardia all just kind of in problem here. By the way, I read a book last week called The Poisoner's Handbook. I would highly recommend it. Very interesting, because a major part of New York City's fight against the poisoning epidemic of the early 1900s, LaGuardia was that guy. LaGuardia was the main voice in New York City politics. I don't know. Sorry about that. I just love reading books like that. So anyways, back to the weather. You can just kind of see here how rough things are. So travel is going to continue to be a problem. I'm hoping my good friend Arlen Suderman, who's supposed to be with me in Columbus today and tomorrow, is going to be able to make his flights given how rough this has been. Okay, I mentioned the lake effect snow. Do you remember last week when I showed you the lake ice concentration, or not ice concentration, but ice cover total was 18%. We are now at 43%. Look at that. And Erie. Look at Erie. Now, Erie is the shallowest of the Great Lakes, as many of you know, and as a result, it is the quickest to freeze over. But given this upcoming temperature forecast, I think this is only going to continue to build in more ice. And I'm just going to take a stab at this, but might as well just toss out a number. I'm going to go 65%. I bet we're at least 65% when we're done with this Arctic air that's coming through to finish this month and start the new one. So here are the temperatures this morning, and you can see that all the way into southern Texas, down to Houston, we're at 26, getting farther to the south in the low 20s here, and the Panhandle's 5 to 8, and much, much colder here throughout the Midwest. Now, the Northeast, I feel, has been the coldest the longest this winter, and I understand that New York City might be approaching, I saw Jim Cantore tweeted about it this morning, New York City might be approaching a record for number of hours below freezing. I'll have to go investigate that myself. I just saw his tweet. Tremendous respect for Jim Cantore and his life's work with respect to weather communication. But just have a look at these temperatures. Now, the reason we're going to start talking about temperatures is this is the next 2 weeks on precipitation. And you can guess it. The flow's doing this, running over the top, and then doing that. And whenever you get this kind of flow in winter, all right, there's just little hope for California, all the way to the Mid-South, Southeast, Southern Plains. And what we have to watch, and this is going to be quite important, is this next weekend. I know you're going, well, I don't see it on the map, but this next weekend, we're going to have to watch the potential for a pretty sizable nor'easter. What it's going to take is to build high pressure in here and get a deep trough to kind of curl up here and then roll up the coast. And you're going to see if we can get those ingredients to come together to give us a classic Miller A type storm system here. I don't know. I'll show it to you in a few moments, but I want you to see that. But given the pattern for the most of the country is dead, all right, let's just have a look at what these temperatures are going to do. Because the flow pattern is dominated by this ridge and a whole lot of ridging happening across the Arctic. So we've displaced a lot of cold air here, comes up into a ridge. Cold air east, cold air across the North Atlantic. We're going to target much of Europe with just strong onshore flow and a lot of wet weather. But where our cold epicenters are here and here. They've been well represented in the models for quite some time. Precip-wise, though, look internationally here. A lot of this is targeting British Columbia or parts of Western Europe. And so we need to be aware that those two areas are kind of the hardest hit out of this. Also around the globe, since we're here, I will talk at the end about the dryness that's in southern Brazil and Argentina, but the wetter conditions have now been squeezed back more toward the southeastern portions of Brazil, opening up, I think, what will be wide open harvest and planting windows in Mato Grosso. And then we have a tropical system that is moving through parts of Western Australia, but it's mainly in the outback, not over major ag areas there. So if we come back to the U.S. and just say, what's the main focus? It's going to have to be on temperatures. And right now, this is what our polar vortex looks like. It is elongated, it is stretched, it is off-kilter, and it is co-located with a deep trough over the Hudson Bay through the North Atlantic. Now, interestingly enough, if you find a month where we saw this recently, you got to go back more than a decade. I think 2014 is where we were kind of pinching in quite a bit of warm air through Europe, through Alaska, into the Chukchi Sea, the Arctic, into Scandinavia. That displaced our polar vortex into two lobes. And we just saw repeated chances at getting Arctic air into this area. Now, for many of you, especially the meteorologists that watch us, we all know 14 was the winter when you think about the last 30 years or so. This was the big one that just delivered Arctic shot after Arctic shot across the eastern two-thirds of the country while leaving the west out of the flow for the most part. All right. So I show you this because right now the new long-range forecast for the strength of the polar vortex is, again, see the average line? It's the darker one right here. It is certainly below the historic normals. And so if we do see a weakened polar vortex and it takes on an orientation, something like we saw in 2014, we're just trying to determine if that's going to be a good analog. I think it is an analog, but I want to be very careful when I explain to you this map. This is January to February. 2014 average temperature anomalies for the full 2 months. And clearly it was a year where the jet stream was doing this, right? And the polar vortex was living in this area. But just what I don't want you to think about here or get wrapped up in is that with all this cold, understand that it's not constant, never relenting cold. We do expect warmth to press into these areas at times. It's just the access to cold air is there. That's the way to interpret this. We have access to cold air. And if you think about persistence in the pattern or you think about the reservoirs of cold air, they're there. They are present in order to make this occur. So here you go. These are max temperatures today. Notice Texas, the South, the Delta. These temperatures are 30 to 40 degrees colder than normal. We then play this through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, it's just constant. Saturday and Sunday. Now, you'd start to notice that right there on February 1st, see this more mild air? Part of this is because the presence of where the trough is going to be is right down here in the upper atmosphere over the south and east. Now, what I want to know on February 1st is how does that low roll up the East Coast? Does it take the trajectory farther offshore? Does it run here? Or does it sit on I-95? That's going to be a major challenge for us to forecast all week. But this is some mild air coming back across the country here. And given that my kids aren't in school today because of the wind chills in East Central Illinois, you know, the temperature of 24 by the end of the week, into the weekend, is going to feel pretty mild. Take a look at these minimum temperatures, though. This is the major concern for Texas, the South. When we get cold like this, we tend to have a lot of problems with our infrastructure, and we just need to understand that it's today and tomorrow as well. I mean, I've got Memphis tomorrow, -1 for a low. Very, very cold air. That's Wednesday. Get down to Thursday's minimum temperatures. Here's Friday this week. Getting into Saturday and again Sunday. Watch right in through here, okay? But before we do that, I just want to point out that when you look at the temperature pattern, sorry, let's take you back. This is the next 5 days on average. As we just slide this forward, what you start to notice is there's some mild air that's trying to build back into the Canadian prairie. In Celsius, this is like 10 to 13 degrees C above average. And that's why a lot of week 2 forecast maps are showing more mild here while we just hang on to the cold across the east, which is why, again, I'm sure Jim Cantore was tweeting about the risk of New York City just continuing its cold streak. All right. but there is some mild air that's coming back into this pattern. This is the operational European model. I would like to show you here we go. This is the ensemble. So there's your next 5 days, day 5 through 10. See this? And then day 10 through 15. And in that entire 15-day time period, we do not let the cold up in this area, especially here. But there is this surge of mild air that's coming in, especially as we get into next week. Just wanted you to see it. Now, keeping on this track on temperatures, I'm curious. We've watched the MJO move out of phase 6 through phase 7, and it lives here today. We're expecting this transition to phase 1 into phase 2. Now, if we're going to go back over mild for much of the United States, especially the eastern half of the United States, we got to sweep the MJO way out here into phases 4, 5, and 6 again. But if it stays in phase 1 or phase 2 or weekly phase 3, the issue is where the troughs like to be. Now, MJO phase 1, I'd like to get a full phase 1 setup. And the reason for that is that would drop in a low pressure center in the atmosphere somewhere over the west, which would increase western U.S. precipitation and drop the temperatures off. That would also set up some southwest flow around some sort of a ridge event here. But this is into February. I'm talking first week of February, second week of February. Phase 2 drops more Arctic air in. See this? And phase 3 tends to just sustain it with only really Florida under the protection of some sort of ridge. So the long and short of it is, when you look at the longer range models, this is kind of week by week what they're expecting in terms of temperatures. So there's week 2. We see that, right? Very well defined in the models. Week 3 just reinforces that cold shot of air into week 4 even. And that's most of February. I mean, that's the last week of February right there. So what I saw in this was, there's warm-ups coming, but we reinforce the Arctic air coming through here, and this is not right. This is a model feedback issue in the west. By the way, just for some consistency, I do want to show you the GFS. Okay, right now, here's this week. That's the warm-up next week. Then we go back over to this Arctic pattern, week 3, and then week 4. So there seems to be quite a bit of consistency here. In fact, I didn't check this, but let's go to the CPC webpage. And their week 3, darn it, apologize. Their week 3, week 4 looks very similar. Sorry, they've got hover options on this page, so it makes a bit of a noise. So there you go. That seems to be where they are in this pattern. All right, now back to precip. Watch the system exit the east and the lake effect behind it. That's really the only game in town. There's a little clipper going over the top of the Great Lakes into the northeast by Tuesday into Wednesday. That's about it. We're trying to see if we can get something to come into the west. See the little front on Tuesday afternoon coming into the west? That's nothing compared to what we can get. So what do we need to watch? Okay, that's halfway through this week, not a whole lot going on. What I'm watching most carefully is this. Okay, this is vorticity in the upper atmosphere. Now right through here, where are we in time? This is Thursday into Friday. Here it is, Saturday, Sunday. Remember I kept telling you about that low down here? This is where it is in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. Now the current European model takes this and hugs the coast, and that would produce a monster nor'easter. But how many times, just listen, how many times this winter have we seen the models, a week out or 10 days out, show us a big nor'easter, and it either zips offshore too quickly or stays too far offshore or doesn't even manifest itself. So I'm very cautious when I talk about this, but that's not the only one. It then shows up right here. Watch this. Here we go with another one on the 6th of February. See it right there. Now, what's interesting is this one is happening on February 1st, just one day before Groundhog's Day, which, of course, the big one is in Pennsylvania. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about anything. But there you go. Now, what does it look like in the models? Let's flip this over to precipitation type and intensity. Excuse me here. Get all these frames loaded up. And here we go. All right, system exits. Clipper comes to the Great Lakes. Front tries to hit the west coast, but it's relatively weak midweek. This is Wednesday. Tuesday night to Wednesday morning. As that happens in the west, okay, notice we're not adding up too much here. You see there's Great Lake effect snow going on during this. Now, this is the setup man right here, this high pressure cell. As we play this forward, okay, that high pressure cell came straight to the south. Now, you know that's going to do to the temperatures. To be honest, I'm watching this side of the high, which I'm following here with the line, to see how much high pressure can be built into the Canadian Maritimes. Because the current European model right now on Saturday at 6 a.m. has got the low here, and it is trying to pull it up the coast. And it's potent. I mean, this is a big system. I just went from, let's go back here. This was on Saturday morning through Sunday morning. That's not even fast moving. Getting out to Monday. And we're curious how well this is represented in the models. Now, that only takes us out just a little more than a week. Let's get in here and just see what the implications could be. Let's go ahead and look at snowfall. You have to remember, already in the Northeast, we have the snow from the current setup. But I'll also kind of zoom in just a hair here. I'm trying to play with the zoom features to make them a bit more sensitive. But as we play it forward, now remember, this is the 0Z run, so this has some of last night's snow in it. All right, not much happening in the west, some lake effect. Now here it is. This is now Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. And if the European's right on this, that is through February 2nd. And we're looking at some huge snowfalls. I'm just basing this off a 10-to-1 ratio. All right, we have to understand that it's a single model run. Is there any consistency in the models? So let's go have a look at the comparison between the GFS left European right. You'll be able to do this on the new site very soon. Okay, here it is. That is now Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. Look at the GFS suppressing this system farther offshore than the European, with much tighter wave rolling straight up along the East Coast. So I just want you to be aware that there are significant model differences. And yes, the European model got the previous storm system more right than the GFS did, but we don't know yet about this. I do want to show you, that's this upcoming weekend, all right? Since that's the only game in town for the next week or so, we're just going to focus on that. But I do want to show you that when you look at the model and you attempt to assess using the ensemble, how many of the ensemble members have it, this is next Saturday morning. See the low pressure along the coast in the European ensemble? It is there, all right? But the question will always be, where does it develop? Because everybody up the East Coast knows if it develops here versus there or there, that's three entirely different looks at this. Just need to understand that right now, the potential exists. That's it. That's the main story here. Okay, last couple things here before we bridge this out into a little bit longer forecast. South America. Probability of getting at least 3 inches of snow. All right, now this was mostly last night. A lot of this is coming in the lake effect. This is through Thursday into Friday. Now we're getting into Saturday. Ready? Watch the southeast. So even the European ensemble through this upcoming weekend is attempting to show the risk here. So we just need to watch it all week. That is all we can say and do right now. It's just a system that needs to be kept a close eye on. Now I hope when we get into February we can flip this pattern around, because the situation in the west is really becoming concerning to me. The jet stream continues to build up into large ridges. These troughs seem to not be able to extend. The heat in the system here, the Arctic ridging effect, which we've talked about, just seems to want to let this pattern persist. And is it characteristic of a La Nina? It is. But you know that La Nina is dying fast. We'll talk about it all week. But it's dying fast, but still we're getting the end results of it here. What I'm curious about is, look at these week 2 forecasts. I mean, they all look the same. No major systems coming through. And again, this is after the weekend storm system that could go through here. But very, very dry pattern. Which brings me back to this. That western ridge, which has been around for most of this new year, is beginning to throw up some major red flags for me across the northern tier of the United States and across the northwest. Now, more in the west than I am about the north central U.S. Let me tell you why. The west makes all of its moisture in winter, right? They do have summer thunderstorms here, but that is not how they rely on getting their moisture for reservoirs, the river systems. It's all snowpack driven. Most of it is snowpack driven. So to see, let's get the dumb drawings up there, to see that this area of the Columbia Basin is so dry, or so much of Montana is dry, is a major concern. Now, why not the northern plains? Well, the northern plains can make up for winter's problems with April and May and June precipitation. It's typical spring thunderstorms. I also want to point out that even though this is all snow-covered, it's still in drought because that snow has not melted, it's not gotten into the soil, and the soil is frozen rock hard because of how cold it was ahead of this. We may not get to keep any of that snow that was in this area. If it gets into the Mississippi, hooray. Same thing for the Carolinas. Yep, they have ice all over the ground right now and snow farther to the north, but it was cold ahead of this system, which makes me worry about the ability to get that snow and ice into the ground after it melts. Okay. By the way, the new 1-month outlook from the GFS and the European all look very similar. This is the month of February. They are drier for the West. They're drier for much of the South, Mid-South, Southeast. And they don't show overly wet conditions very many places. In fact, you can tell the trajectory, what the model's trying to do. Run up over the top, dip out the east. That's it. So we'll keep an eye on this. Very, very close. Okay, last couple things. Just want to take you to South America real quick. Mato Grosso did report on Friday its newest harvest numbers on soybeans. Compared to the last 5 years, it is the new kind of fastest, just over the last 5 years, at nearly 14% done. About 5.5% is average, okay? If we go look at the pattern coming forward, the fact that we've seen dryness return to Mato Grosso, which means this week they're going to probably get much more harvesting done. Very wet farther to the south in both models, and you can see that we still have this issue in the far southern Brazil and Argentina, very, very dry. And the longer that lasts, the greater the concern is going to be, because it's also there in the GFS as well when you look out over the next couple of weeks. I do note that the new seasonal outlook from the European model for the month of February maintains the very wet conditions here, which could start to be an issue with the harvest of soybeans and planting of safrinha corn. I don't think it's a Mato Grosso problem, but maybe Mato Grosso do Sul, over towards Sao Paulo, maybe parts of Goiás, it could be an issue, but this needs to be watched carefully. Because if they build the second half of their summer into drought into Argentina, that's really going to continue to put the clamp on their estimates for the size of the crops down there. So that could become newsworthy going forward. We just need to pay attention to it and watch how long it lasts, understanding that the models are attempting to go over drier in that region. All right? That's it. Be safe this week. I'll talk to you again on Wednesday. Matt will pick it up tomorrow morning. Thanks.